On September 21st, the Russian army had an epic disaster day. In just one day, Ukrainian soldiers beheaded 1,440 enemy troops. Tanks and armored vehicles, a total of 59 were turned into scrap metal on the spot. Traditional and self-propelled artillery lost 62 units. The Ukrainian forces went all out, making the Russian army wail and moan. Especially in the Bakhmut direction, the Russian troops were practically jumping into a burning pit. Bakhmut latest. The story begins with the Russian army, unwilling to stay idle, plotting to sneak up on the coal mine heights north of Chasiv Yar. The original plan was to capture the coal mine, gain the high ground, and easily control the entire area. But as soon as they crossed the Kolanivka Canal, they ran headfirst into a firepower trap that the Ukrainians had set up long ago. The Ukrainian forces, perched high on the hills, rained down fire before the Russians even had a chance to catch their breath. The Ukrainian Air Force used U.7-made Gu-39 precision-guided bombs to give the Russians a face full of explosions. Drones even turned the Russian army's big killer, the TOS-1 thermobaric rocket launcher, into smithereens. Not one to admit defeat, the Russian army reinforced and launched a fierce attack, but the Ukrainians saw through their tactics instantly. So another round of heavy fire ensued. The Russian sneak attack turned into a suicide mission, and the mood suddenly got quite tragic. After hitting a wall at Kalinivka, they decided to try their luck north at Horoivka. The Russian aerospace forces dropped a bunch of bombs, aiming to seize the Ukrainian trenches on the east side of the canal. But even if they managed to take those positions, they'd still face a canal and 2 kilometers of open ground. Did they really think the Ukrainians would let them waltz through? Dream on. In short, the Russian army rested for a month, planning a big offensive, but stumbled right out of the gate. Looks like tough days ahead for them. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are sitting pretty, waiting to see what else the Russians might try. On September 20th, our Ukrainian buddies were busy near Vovchansk. 2 major combat groups merged near Taiki, leaving the Russians utterly baffled. They had hoped to establish a buffer zone in northern Kharkiv to protect Belgorod Oblast, and were even thinking about launching a sneak attack toward Kupiansk from Vovchansk. But their plans backfired spectacularly. The Ukrainian forces deployed more advanced drones that not only filmed but also bombed, leaving the Russian logistics lines in tatters. The Ukrainian Air Force's 114th Tactical Aviation Brigade joined the fray, using Bu-39 guided bombs to launch a bombing spree on Russian positions in Vovchansk. They leveled a hospital, wiping out 2 entire Russian companies along with their equipment. Seeing the front lines crumbling, the Russian army hastily resorted to Fabi bombs and thermobaric weapons for airstrikes, but they only managed to destroy 1 bridge over the Vovcha River. Several others remained intact. Now that the Taiki Heights are in Ukrainian hands, all they need to do is concentrate their forces and equipment. With the high ground advantage, they could pose a serious threat to Russian positions north of Vovchansk. The Ukrainian 7th Battalion from the Taiki direction and the Tsunami Regiment east of Vovchansk have merged from east and west, boosting their combat power significantly. The Russian defensive line in Vovchansk is on the brink of collapse. Ukraine has opened a new front in Kursk, forcing the Russian army to be stretched thin with insufficient troops and equipment. The Ukrainians took the opportunity to pummel the Russians in Vovchansk, leaving them utterly disoriented. If Ukraine can maintain this momentum, we might soon witness a major victory, pushing the Russian forces out of Kharkiv. Our Ukrainian friends are about to have another highlight moment. On the 21st, in the Marinka battle zone, the Russian army launched a group attack for the second time in 10 days, deploying a total of 52 pieces of equipment. Ukraine's 46th Brigade destroyed 8 tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, 4 armored vehicles, 1 Telb, and even a motorcycle, damaging 4 more infantry fighting vehicles. The remaining Russian forces scattered and fled. Drone mayhem, Sarmat dreams shattered, Putin freaking out. In the early hours of September 21st, Ukrainian drones paid a special visit to the Grau No-23 armament plant north of Moscow and the 719th Artillery Ammunition Depot in southern Krasnodar. For 3 consecutive days, 3 Russian ammunition depots have been blown up. Looks like their plan to bombard Ukraine just got a lot harder. The Grau No-23 armament plant is one of Russia's 7 major armament hubs, located just 16 kilometers south of the Toropets ammunition depot that was bombed on the 19th. This time, 750,000 artillery shells were lined up to get blasted. After being hit twice in a row, multiple railways from Moscow, Pskov, and St. Petersburg to Smolensk had to shut down. The 719th Artillery Ammunition Depot in Tikhoretsk, southern Russia, stored several thousand tons of artillery and ammunition from North Korea. These were usually transported via sea or through Rostov Oblast to supply the front lines, and also served as an ammunition depot for guarding southern Russia's Muslim regions. The area isn't large, only about 1 square kilometer, so the massive fire spread to the adjacent Air Force base. Russia claimed that in the early morning attacks on the 21st, they took down 101 drones, and that the ammunition depot fires were caused by drone debris. Sounds particularly amusing. On September 18th, the Turpets ammunition depot, which Russia had prepared for operations against the Baltic states, suffered devastating losses. Only 11 out of 140 depots survived, and a large amount of ammunition stored outdoors was wiped out in the explosions. Handling unexploded ordnance is time-consuming and laborious, so the Russian Ministry of Defense might just opt to seal it off and leave it be on the 20th. Ukrainian forces launch follow-up drone strikes there because in real combat, one attack often isn't enough. Multiple strikes are needed to paralyze the opponent's capabilities. It seems Ukraine now boasts considerable drone production capacity and strike power. The Tarapets attack has undoubtedly become a milestone in the war. Ukrainians used 100 drones to take out 3 months' worth of Russian artillery shells without losing a single soldier and saved on equipment to boot. This is textbook-level maximum destruction, leaving the opponent no way out. Putin had originally planned to launch the Doomsday-level Sarmat intercontinental missile on September 21st, but Ukrainian drones attacked the launch base, forcing a postponement of the launch. He intended to use this Doomsday weapon to showcase his might, but Ukraine stepped over a big red line with their drones. Ukraine attacked the Shaikovka military airport in Russia's Kaluga region. Parked there are nuclear-capable Tu-22M strategic bombers, famous for launching Ka-22 missiles. The EU vice president announced that 70% of the promised 1 million shells have been sent to Ukraine. Ukraine's TC-72 and Poland's Pete-91 tanks are using shell 125mm He-1 shells produced by Munitions India Limited. These shells not only look striking with their yellow coating and English lettering, but the entire munition production line was originally imported from Russia. This batch of shells imported by Ukraine are all high-explosive rounds, weighing 23 kilograms, containing 60% rejects and 40% TNT explosives. With a warhead of 3.4 kilograms, they're designed specifically to take out infantry, capable of creating a 40-meter wide and 20-meter long lethal zone in one blast. Quantum surveillance on Xi Jinping, global undercover operations. North Korea is ramping up tensions. On the morning of September 18th, they fired multiple short-range ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan, their second provocative act in a week. Just days earlier, Pyongyang publicly revealed its uranium enrichment facilities for the first time, vowing to expand its nuclear arsenal. These actions aren't random, but they're backed by China and Russia. Clearly, North Korea's show is set to continue. With the U.S. election approaching, North Korea's moves seem purposeful to add bargaining chips for future negotiations. The U.S. is currently bogged down by complex domestic political games and doesn't have the bandwidth to deal with North Korea's provocations. Meanwhile, China and Russia watch from the sidelines, seemingly pleased, allowing North Korea to stir the pot openly while they push for larger international maneuvers behind the scenes. On the Russia-Ukraine battlefield, Putin has ramped up conscription efforts. In the Middle East, Hezbollah and Israel are already exchanging fire. East of Taiwan, China's Liaoning aircraft carrier is taking a stroll, planning big moves in October. Any of these hotspots could trigger full-scale conflicts. The aim is to launch multi-pronged attacks during the U.S. election time, weakening the dollar's dominance, disrupting global supply chains, and even stirring internal chaos in the United States. This isn't a spur-of-the-moment plan by China and Russia. They've long been eyeing the U.S. election cycle, preparing to strike at America's global leadership. If the West can't keep up, any one of these battlefields could become their main stage, but if the West responds effectively, China and Russia will look for opportunities to stir up trouble elsewhere, seeking strategic openings. In the Middle East, Russian Defense Minister Shoigu made a sudden visit to Iran, carrying a personal letter from Putin. The Middle East conflict is escalating, coupled with Israel's strikes on Hezbollah's communication equipment. It's clear that the West has gathered enough intelligence to realize that China, Russia, and Iran are plotting a larger military action. Israel, showcasing its trump card by destroying Hezbollah's communication gear, indicates that the Western alliance is prepared for large-scale conflict. The U.S.'s comprehensive grasp of China, Russia, and Iran's covert support for Hezbollah shows that intelligence warfare is everywhere. The U.S. can track every move of its opponents and even obtain the intelligence through technological means like destroying Hezbollah's communication devices. This demonstrates that while China and Russia attempt to secretly orchestrate warfare, their every move is actually under Western surveillance. Speaking of technology, the U.S. isn't just leading in cutting-edge fields like quantum entanglement. It's also showcasing limitless future possibilities with technologies like 5D storage crystals. Quantum entanglement allows two particles, no matter how far apart, to instantly sense each other. This means the U.S. has the capability to remotely monitor all secret actions of regimes like China's. Xi Jinping might think his secret underground operations are hidden, but in reality, the photos have long been in American hands. Similarly, 5D storage crystal technology can store massive amounts of information for billions of years without degradation. In the future, we might even use this data to print humans or historical scenes. In contrast, the Chinese regime is still obsessed with the value of big data, while the US has long moved beyond that, playing with the dimensions of time and space. The West not only maintains its lead through high technology, but also occasionally showcases some leftover tech to psychologically deter opponents. For example, search engine technologies like Google and Yahoo were originally open-source derivatives from the US military. The big data that China is tinkering with now is just a culmination of decades-old US tech. Israel's recent actions against Hezbollah further reveal just the tip of the iceberg of high-end technology. These appetizers have already shocked the world, while China and Russia can't even grasp the underlying principles. In reality, the US has long completed its encirclement of the Chinese regime. From land to seabed, sky to outer space, comprehensive missile and weapon systems with no blind spots are fully deployed. The Typhoon missile systems deployed by the US and the Philippines can strike targets on the Chinese mainland. Such military actions are the real confrontation. Diplomatic rhetoric is merely a facade to lull China and Russia into complacency. The US not only overpowers its opponents technologically, but also uses psychological warfare and tech demonstrations to clearly declare to the world, no matter how bold you are, you can't escape our grasp. The current global situation is complex and fraught with peril. Multiple hotspots like North Korea, the Middle East, and the South China Sea could become the main battlefields of the future. Every move by China and Russia is gradually being imposed under Western surveillance and suppression. As the US election approaches, major powers worldwide are brewing their next steps, and the real showdown might just be beginning. Whether the Western alliance can effectively meet these challenges will determine the future of our world. That's all for today's special report. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to stay updated with our coverage. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.